This is the Tree of Life, Season 8, Chapter 2. In this episode, we will be talking about interference as a manifestation of asymmetrical direct ground experiences corresponding to non-reciprocation. In Episode 7 of Season 7, we talked about how direct ground experiences underlying synchronicity are paired such that each actor takes on the role of the reciprocator in each version, whilst the other initiates. This was described as producing symmetry between the affirmational structures constructed upon those direct ground experiences. In other words, through the 9 dialogues, 9 impulses are affirmed, through 9 separate experience channels, for each actor. But, we also talked about how if one of the actors negates one version of that reciprocal exchange, it releases them to a dissonant consensuality. We talked about how, in the processing or spatial mapping of that dissonant space, the actor uses sublimating language through negation to construct a negational or hybrid structure within that dissonant space. We also talked about how, in response to the vacuum created by loosening associations within that dissonant space, another actor will fill in the void by affirming the indirect ground experiences, which are foundational to that negational structure, rendering it affirmational. In other words, we assumed that the other actor, who fills the void left through the dissonant space, is a new individual, heretofore not part of the actor's archetypal constellation, with limited common experience. But what if the individual who intercedes, so to speak, has some common experiences? The answer is, if those individuals do not affirm, or have a common affirmational structure, the same experiences, then the involvement of this individual will generate a kind of friction, as between their corresponding affirmational, or hybrid, or negational structures. Let me give you an example. Suppose that you regret something that happened in the past with some X. Suppose that manifests as negation with respect to certain experiences in the past. That is to say, you have constructed a negational, or hybrid structure on those experiences. Now, your intersection with that X at some future time may interfere with that negational structure, if on the other hand she has constructed an affirmational structure upon those experiences. That is to say, although affirmational structures, by virtue of their symmetry, do not produce this friction, or interference, when negational and affirmational structures interact, there will always be some degree of interference with the subsequent formation of a dissonant space. More precisely, this shows us that negation is not a freestanding ability of an actor, except manifesting as sublimation. But rather, it is a consequence of there being some regret over some past experience, a reflection of how an individual relates to their own memories and choices. It also shows us that affirmational and negational structures of 2 individuals interact subliminally preceding each intersection. Thus, involvement of 2 actors, who have diametrically opposed structures, can impair the ability of either of them to subsequently negate, post priori, and slip into a dissonant space. Finally, the retraction of one's impulses through the unconditional, or non-contingent action. That is, in the reliance upon the current, or oscillation of a structure, to determine when a resubstitution event occurs, involves the withdrawal of the willing suspension of disbelief from one's surroundings, as in the becoming of the direct ground itself. That's the end of the podcast for today.